Ewan, next I want to talk about a much less fun topic, truth be told, but there was a great report recently from Wired which looked into the reality of generated AI in Activision Blizzard games especially, but primarily over on the Activision side of things. It is a report that we can kind of only go through the cliff notes of here. I definitely recommend everyone should read it, but the general gist is that, at least from Activision's side of things, the use of generative AI in games has already started to be rolled out. And what I mean by that is not just internal use of AI in terms of coming up with storyboards or concept art, but actual in your game's products that you can buy that are entirely AI generated, including Call of Duty skins, which were apparently available on the Call of Duty store for Modern Warfare 3 last year. So let me just kind of sum up what this all is about. The Wired article says that Activision essentially started pursuing AI in early 2023, using it for the likes of internal ideas like concept art and storyboards, like I mentioned. However, despite assurances that it wasn't going to be used for the front end of these games and it wasn't going to replace jobs, that quickly started to snowball and doesn't seem to be the case anymore. The Wired article says, quote, "Managers at video game companies aren't necessarily using AI to eliminate entire departments, but many are using it to cut corners, ramp up productivity, and compensate for attrition after layoffs. In other words, bosses are already using AI to replace and degrade jobs." Now, I bring this quote up because it's important to note, and Wired notes this as well, that it's not like these companies are just kind of sacking entire departments and replacing them with AI. It's more that they're cutting a substantial amount of staff, and in order to pick up the work and replace the productivity from that staff, the remaining staffers and the remaining artists are now being required to deal in AI and use AI and lean on AI to make up that kind of productivity. So while they're not entirely cutting the human element out, it is being radically downsized, at least currently, from this 2D artistry perspective, again, concept art and the like. Before we get into the rest of it, it was a shocking article, I found, but sadly not surprising considering the amount of stories we've heard this year in particular and the sheer amount of layoffs from, teams across the board, not just in Activision and Blizzard.
Yeah, no, totally. It's one of the most depressing reads of the year and really does kind of highlight the complete shameless, reckless sprinting that has come along with AI in terms of, these execs have seen this trendy new buzz technology and have just gone straight into it without any kind of cause of concern for their employees, their actual product as well, because we know that generative AI products made from, the language models look terrible. We know that these things look bad, and there have been obviously in the news recently, there's been advice being given in Wall Street to companies urging them to slow down this mad rush towards AI, because not only is it causing ridiculous environmental damage, it's also actually affecting perceptions of their products, which is absolutely going to be the case in video games. And the more that you see generative AI cannibalize itself and we get even more grotesque and weird things, the thing that I find most upsetting about all of this, beyond people losing their jobs, is the fact that the people who've stayed are now having to incorporate something that is so fundamentally anti-art and anti-human into their workflows. It's just ridiculous to me that people in positions of power, and I understand what they're motivated by here, is, higher profit margins, better ways to impress their shareholders or whatever. But it fundamentally, I feel like there is a difference here between creative people and financial-centric people in regards to what is ethical and what actually looks good, and the idea of being proud of your workers. It really upsets me that the fact that in order to survive in the industry in this specific moment, because I do hope that there'll be an actual concerted pushback, and I think the Wired article talks about growing efforts to unionize and how certain studios are banning the use of certain generative AI models. I would just hope that, I don't know. It's really, really, really upsetting. I don't like the idea that in order to survive in this current moment of time, the artists who are so talented, like come on, these guys are doing amazing jobs, have been for ages, and now having to incorporate something that is basically dredging the internet and stealing other people's stuff to, make them slightly more productive or efficient. Productive isn't the right word there, and neither is efficient, because this thing is the opposite of efficient. But it genuinely does just paint a terrible picture, and I wish that this infatuation, this stupid fad would come to an end already.
100%, man. I mean, you've raised so many good points there that are also, explored in this article. I think I want to go back to what you mentioned about like the actual quality of the work, because there were some really cool excerpts here that apparently like a lot of the executives know that AI art isn't necessarily amazing, but the way they describe it here is that it is, quote, good enough, so they can have something to work with, and a picture is being painted for this kind of race to the bottom when it comes to like quality. It's like, yeah, if the art is good enough, then why do we need to pay all of these artists that in their eyes, certainly not my words, are only going to make stuff marginally better for quadruple the price and maybe quadruple the time, whereas now it seems like they're really relying on this idea that they can fabricate something with AI and then get an artist to touch it up and make it that little bit better and work from that canvas that's already been brought to the table, which I just think is not good at art, not good at all. And one of the quotes here says, generative AI can most capably produce 2D images that managers in cost-squeezed studios might consider good enough, a term AI watching creative workers now use as shorthand for the kind of AI output that's not a threat to replacing great art, but is a threat to their livelihoods. Some clients care more about the cost than quality. After all, tasks like 3D animation and programming are, for now at least, much harder to automate in full, end quote. Now, I wanted to bring that up not just because I think it is a great summation of the difference between what executives want and what they're willing to pay for, but I like that it says, managers in cost-squeezed studios might consider good enough art, but we're not talking about cost-squeezed studios in this regard. We're talking about the biggest publishers and biggest game makers in the world. Companies like Activision, Blizzard, that are now owned by Microsoft. Admittedly, this isn't a Microsoft thing that's been imposed since the merger. This was all happening pre-merger and into it, but still, a company that has so much money and isn't lacking when it comes to being able to pay these artists. And I just think that is, over a long period of time, yes, you might see those short-term gains, right? But you're going to see worse art, worse quality, less trust in the brand. And who are you going to turn to? Because you've pivoted to this entire model, and the artists that are left are overworked and having to rely on this AI learning.
I think the most depressing thing about all this is that it's not like the first step on the road to the devaluation of artists and creatives as people in this industry, and broadly across multiple industries as well. We know that creative work is highly insecure. A lot of it is based on self-employment, and if you're lucky enough to get a job at a studio, the fact that you now have to deal with these contentions on top of that is ridiculous. And I think the thing that I find most frustrating about this, talking about the price comparison point, how it's cheaper to, and quote unquote more convenient to create an AI generated image to convey a certain concept that you want to convey to, a shareholder or your upper management or whatever, or for game designers to work from. It's the idea that, like, I've completely forgotten where I was going with this, which is really annoying. I've gotten so wound up about it. I do remember now. It's the fact that, like, they're talking about how it's too expensive. It's like, well, we've seen artists not being paid well enough for years. You know what I mean? Like, it's not exactly like it's massively lucrative. Like, it's quite an insecure environment for a lot of people. It's primarily driven by their passion, which has been historically exploited by this industry for many years. So it's the fact, on top of the insecure work, on top of the idea of, people having to chase payment as artists, people having to deal with plagiarism as artists, people having to deal with, whatever. It's now that this is on top of that. And more, I really does kind of just break my heart that industries that profit from creative people aren't looking after creative people, and it frustrates me even more that creative directors, game directors, heads up of big studios don't want to stand in solidarity with their fellow employees. And I know the article does mention, efforts to unionize and stuff. This needs to be happening yesterday. People really, really need to get a grip on this before it spirals out of control, because otherwise, it's just gonna. And I don't want to be a doomer about all of this, but it does just strike me as naive to think that anyone is unsafe from the threat of someone who wants to, for the sake of convenience, for the sake of saving some money, wants to extricate the human element from their work. That's it's encroaching its way into many, many different avenues right now.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
One of the most insidious things that I took from the article, it kind of links to what you mentioned there, and this obviously is not to absolve anyone of responsibility in terms of, being able to push back against it, but I thought it was telling that, for instance, Blizzard hasn't incorporated, the likes of ChatGPT or any of the other models into their work, but the article does reveal that they have been working on an internal model that is being developed kind of very secretively, and not many people other than the people who are actually working on it know what it is. And that kind of goes with the idea that a lot of the people interviewed for the article say they know generative AI is being used at their company, but they're not entirely sure what it's being used for, if that makes sense. Like, they know it's happening, they know it's in one department over there, but it's kind of being restricted in a way where it's not readily available information. Like, I don't think it's been revealed which skins in the Call of Duty store were actually AI or anything like that. So I think the sort of secrecy around it and the kind of tiptoeing around it of, yeah, we use it, but we just use it here and there. We're not going to give all those details. I think that is, really insidious and really not great, because you mentioned there in your last point, the idea of, copyright and plagiarism, obviously with all of these tools scanning previously made work and then, cobbling together something out of that. But these internal models I find fascinating, because those are being made by art from within the company. And you mentioned there the precarious nature of these jobs now and how they always have been, and how these artists are being treated. But the article goes on to say that a lot of these 2D designers now are being contracted for work within the studio to provide art for these AI models, and are then, let go or don't have their contracts renewed because they've contributed to the model, and now hopefully the model is good enough. And that is dystopian. You're essentially being hired to work on the thing that is being made to replace you, essentially.
I cannot imagine how disheartening it must be for people who are going to university, going to college with designs of getting into art as the actual industry of it. Maybe they want to get into video games specifically as a concept designer. We know this stuff is already encroaching into the movies as well. It's encroaching everywhere. I cannot imagine just how demoralizing this must be, and my heart really does go out to folks who have put so much time and effort and attention into this. And I really, for everyone's sake, I hope this is just a blip. I hope that there is enough collective outrage at how crap the AI looks that companies will walk this back. But there is an obscene amount of money being pulled into this. The fact that they're already recalibrating long-term as well as short-term roles to accommodate integration with AI tools like Sora and ChatGPT and stuff. That is just hugely concerning. And I understand that for people who are in business who want to maximize their profits or whatever. For me, this comes down to like a baseline resentment of the creative people who delivered them their riches. And I will never, ever be able to forgive anyone who is taking part in this. I'm getting very emotional about this, and I'm trying not to be overly emotional in these videos, but I feel like this is such a life or death issue in this industry across multiple creative industries that the fact that it's gotten to this point already speaks to a massive lack of responsibility and just complete neglect to the industry overall. It is baffling to me in that regard. I just can't fundamentally grasp the thought processes that have led to this actually coming about, other than someone who works at the top end of one company is really, really annoyed that they can't draw a picture enough you know what I mean? Like, for me, it just comes down to a baseline level of resentment. So, yeah, no, AI sucks, and if you're getting up to no good with it, you're on the list.
I've got a couple final things for you, and that aren't good, that aren't promising, actually. One thing from the Wired interview itself, where they note that a CVL report says that, quote, by some estimates, Gen AI may contribute to more than half of the game development process in the next 5 to 10 years, and that the gaming industry in particular has already embraced AI the most out of any industry. Now, you know, these consulting firms have been wrong many times before, like saying that mobile was going to be the future, or saying that crypto was going to make gaming $1 billion. But I do think this is a little bit different from the likes of what even were they called, you and those crypto-related things
NFTs.
that you could buy. NFTs. That's how little headspace that has now. That was such a fad, but AI, the fact that we're already starting to see people make money off it, and the fact that there already have been implications like this, real livelihood implications of a lot of 2D studios being gutted, like is described here, or like you were mentioning, people who are coming through, new talent who in their job descriptions are now required to know about AI tools to help them with the job. Like, that is going to have like a long-term impact on the industry in a way that NFTs didn't. And it's funny that you mentioned there the resentment from the higher ups, and that kind of like the lack of responsibility and the lack of respect they have for the people who made them their money in the first place. This is not about AI, but I want to throw it in just because I found it fascinating and it got me so angry this morning. It was from the Capcom shareholder Q&A, where they were taking questions from shareholders, a lot of which were like, just made you think, no wonder the industry is the way it is. But one shareholder asked this question. They say, quote, "You launched Street Fighter 6 last year and have reported unit sales for the base game. However, what about unit sales for DLC? Also, with respect to net sales for DLC, tell me about how much profit is being made in contrast to the annual cost for maintaining the Street Fighter 6 team." And there was something about that quote that just chilled me to my bones. This idea that a shareholder could just casually throw out of, oh, you're supporting this game, all right, but you know, why don't we just maybe sack off that team if it's not doing well? And to be fair, to Capcom's credit, in the response, which again was very corporate because it's going to shareholders, they essentially were like, look, we're not going to reveal the profits for the DLC because we think supporting a game like this builds trusts with the consumers who have bought into it in the first place, will make them think better of the brand, will enjoy their purchase, and will want to return to the franchise. And it's like, it just makes you realize those executives are not thinking about that at all. They're thinking, as soon as this stops making as much profit as we want, let's just cut that off, get rid of that team, and then get those numbers back up, baby. And it was just, I know shareholders have always been like this, but to just see it in writing like that and just kind of so casually, yeah. It did not start me well for the day, I'll put it that way.
It's some kind of like cultural rot going on here. And this is the thing that, again, that wasn't specifically AI related. And I do have to laugh at the naivete of that shareholder, because like, I feel like Japanese companies have a really strong kind of loyalty ethic to employees in the long term. I might be getting that wrong, so if I am, please let me know in the comments. But yeah, like the idea of like the cultural shifts that AI just empowers monstrousness and laziness, and the idea that people are just expendable and that I can just plug my crappy input into a plagiarism farm and it'll fire up, you know, the thing that I want. That's the thing that I worry in terms of, again, not to say that social media is a basic net negative or anything, but when that came along, that changed the way that we interacted with everything. And I'm hugely, hugely concerned that because AI empowers and enables in the worst way, that it might have lasting staying power. But certainly for video games, I hope that the people who are most impacted by this are able to mount a proper opposition to it, and that, you know, we as people who consume this stuff don't suffer any foolishness, don't suffer any stupid garbled AI art, Keep your eyes peeled, look out for it, scrutinize it, and if you do see it, kick up a stink, because nothing will ever be a substitute for something that an actual human has drawn. Sorry, Sonny from iRobot.
Nah, 100%. I can only echo what you said. I think the most revealing thing that this article brings to light is just how accelerated this process has been. You know, it says that at the start of 2023, Activision was saying, don't worry, we're never going to use this for actual products. And by the end of 2023, they were selling AI assets in their Call of Duty store. And like you said, I feel like in other industries, there has been a real backlash to the idea of generative AI in movies, for instance. You know, we saw Last Night with the Devil, is that what it was called?
Oh, Late Night with the Devil, yeah.
Late Night with the Devil last year, having some AI images in it, and that was immediately this huge thing where everyone sort of immediately rallied and was like, this is not cool, this seems like this sliding slope. And I do think, again, this Wired interview just sort of epitomizes what that sliding slope looks like. Right now, you can say, well, we're only using it for this. Well, it's only 3 images in a movie, but like you said, that only emboldens these executives to get more aggressive with it, and then you see layoffs, then you see generative AI actually going into the end product, and not good. So, not great, Bob.